Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 2017 Nissan 370Z. Up front is a 3.7 liter V6 and down below is a 6-speed manual transmission. And if you want to read more of my thoughts, head on over to carmarshal.com/overdrive. We'll be writing a complete article about the 370. But let's get back to that 3.7 liter V6. Well, that's actually where the car gets its name. 370 comes from the 3.7 liter. Nissan has a really nice way of naming their cars after the engine displacement. So 240SX is a 2.4 liter. The 180 that was sold in Japan was a 1.8 liter, so on and so forth. Now this is a VQ engine, and a lot of people give VQ engines crap for sounding not the best. But honestly, this is a slightly modified exhaust. This isn't 100% stock. But it doesn't sound that bad. I get it straight piped, they don't sound great. But really, from the factory, they're not bad sounding engines by any means. That being said, it puts about 330 horsepower to the crank, so you can do whatever math you want for it being rear-wheel drive to how much actually gets to the wheels. I've heard so many different equations to do it that you can do your own math. This thing is definitely peppy, it definitely has power, but more so than anything, it has torque. That's what I loved about the Nissan 350Z that I reviewed. And what's so surprising to me is that the engine was so torquey. Well, it's the same story with the 370. Really, put it in any gear and it's gonna take it. And you don't need that much to get the car going. That also being said, you don't need to give it much to really downshift it. That's the other thing that when I first drove this car, and I'll get into the story of that at the end of the video, when I was rev matching, I was way over revving it because I'm used to a rotary and you have to give it 1,000 or 2 of RPM just to rev match. But this thing, you barely kick the throttle and it's rev matched. Now this is a base model, so it doesn't have that auto rev matching feature like some people think all 370Zs have. Not all 370Zs have that. So if you are looking at buying a base model, just know that it's not going to have that rev matching feature. But if you do want to see a video of me driving a car that does have that feature, I recently did a Camaro 1LE, and that is on my channel. So the transmission, nothing really special. It's nice that it's a 6-speed. Definitely nicer than it being a 5-speed. You get that nice highway cruising gear up top. The one thing is that I don't know what it is, but for some reason this clutch was really weird for me to get used to at first. It's not that it bites super high or bites super low. I can't put my finger on it, but there's just something that's not right about it right off the bat, and it took some getting used to. So let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have one large tachometer, and I really like that. It really gives the car a sports car feel. Then to the right of that is the speedometer as well as the odometer, so the mileage, which this car only has 15,000 miles on it. Then to the left, you have another little gauge pod, but it's not really a gauge. It's a little screen. Right now it's displaying the outside temperature, my fuel, and my coolant temperature. Now the cool thing about the fuel and coolant temperatures is that the fuel's a bar and then the coolant temp is just a dot. So when you're really getting on it, if you're say gonna track this car or something like that, you're gonna see that dot start to inch up, which is, I think that's just a cool way of displaying the temperature of the car. It's kind of like a video game. It's kind of like your health bar. A really nice feature as well on the gauge cluster is when you do get up towards that red line, which is at 7,500 RPM, there's a red light that'll start flashing at you. In the center, I have 3 more gauges which are angled towards the driver. I think it's really cool. One of them is a clock, one of them is your voltage meter, and the other one is another coolant temperature gauge. So if you don't really trust the dots, if you want to know exactly how hot you're running, you can look at that gauge far left on the center, and it'll actually tell you in actual degrees. Now you might be thinking like, why would they just put gauges up there and use it for a clock and a voltage gauge? You could have either put that, in front of the driver or in the infotainment center or something else. Well, I actually really like it because it opens up the opportunity to put different gauges there later. So say you do want to track this car, you want to build this car, you can live without a clock, so replace the clock with a boost gauge, and many people do. If you do really want to track the car, replace the voltage meter with an oil temperature gauge. It really kind of gives you a factory place to put aftermarket gauges, so you don't have to drill into your A-pillar or put it like right up here, buy the tachometer, then it gets really mixed up in the cluster. I think that's a nice feature that they basically left you gauge pods, but actually didn't leave them blank. In the center, you get a giant cubby hole that opens up like a garage door, which is really interesting. I'm surprised they didn't put the radio up higher. Speaking of which, you do get a radio, which honestly, it looks pretty dated. For a 2017, this looks like a pretty dated radio, which is fine. It's very functional. It does have a USB input, so you can put all your modern music into it. So it's not like it doesn't function. It just doesn't look as high-tech as I thought it would. Then down below that, you get your air conditioning controls. Then you have your shifter and your hazard button. And then because this is a base model, it does have 3 blank switches by the shifter, which unfortunately I don't have any idea what they do. I'm going to imagine one of them would be heated seats. Then you get your cup holder and your center console. The other thing I don't really like about the interior, besides the radio, is that I pulled into a parking garage here so I could really see it. Almost every light besides the speedometer and tachometer is orange, or really amber. I don't know why Nissan has done this. I don't know why they keep doing this. They've been doing this since the 2000s, but for whatever reason, they fill their interiors with orange lights. And it's all right, but it's so much orange. And so if you're not a fan of the color orange, you're probably not gonna fall in love with every single light on the dash. It is a 2-seater, not a 4-seater. I really thought that Nissan today, this day and age, they would try to cram back seats. I mean, for heaven's sake, the GTR has back seats. But nope, they didn't even attempt to put back seats back there. Although it looks like maybe they would fit. No, there are no back seats. One weird thing that I actually didn't find on the interior of the 370 was a trunk release button. I don't know if I just am stupid and I can't find it or what is going on, but I sat here in this parking garage because this is where I do the outside videos and all that stuff, and I wanted to show off the trunk, which we'll talk about in a second, but I couldn't find a trunk release button. I had to get out of the car and go around back. So like I mentioned earlier, this car does have a very large trunk. It's, I guess, technically a hatchback. The whole rear glass comes up, and it actually opens up to a pretty sizable trunk. You can actually fit a decent amount of stuff in the back. The last thing I like about the interior is how small it feels, which will contradict my next speaking point, but the interior is pretty close. And that's nice for a sports car. That's nice. That's what I want. I don't want to feel like I'm this huge boat on the road. It actually does have a lot closer of a feeling. But speaking of that, I was super excited to do this review because a while back, actually it's coming up on a year ago, I did a 350Z, which is the older version of this car. As you could guess, it has a 3.5 liter V6 instead of a 3.7. And personally, I was always more fond of the 350s. I thought they looked better. I thought, you know, they didn't look as fat. The 370, I always thought looked bigger and fatter than the 350. And that's why I always preferred 350s over 370s. But I have never been happier to eat my own words, to put my shoe in my mouth, than right now, because I will tell you, I would take a 370Z over a 350. I thought they looked large, and granted, at a distance, not next to a 350Z, you would think that they're larger, but it certainly doesn't feel much larger. As I just mentioned with the interior actually feels small. It feels like a little cockpit. And the power's right there, and not only that, it sounds great, and it's so comfortable. It's a new car. Of course it's gonna be more comfortable than the 350Z. And so I believe I said in my 350Z review, I'll play it right after this, but I'm pretty sure I said that the 370 was the fatter, uglier cousin to the 350. And I was surprised at why people even still bought 370Zs. I didn't even know that people still bought 370Zs. And I know people are gonna say, oh, well, Nissan still makes a 370Z. Who's still buying 370Zs? I rarely see them. They haven't come up with anything new in quite some time. The 370Z is a lost child to me. I don't even know if it counts as a Z. And to a little bit of that, I do still stick with my word. I do stick with the fact that I don't hear of people buying 370Zs. Every time I go to the Nissan dealership, they don't really have many. I can't really believe that these are great selling cars. But on the flip side of that, I don't understand why. These cars are great. And honestly, they are fun sports cars. It must be the fact that they are truly two-seaters. That must turn people away. There is one more thing about the 370Z, why I was so excited to do this review. And it's a little bit of a story, but follow me here. So the owner of this car, Kyle, he owns the Camaro ZL1 that I reviewed back in the wintertime. Since then, he has added about 130 some horsepower. It's on nearly drag radials now. It's built. It is quick. And so he wanted to buy a daily driver that he could also have fun with out on the track, because his Camaro is a straight line speed car, but it doesn't really handle corners well. And so he wanted something he could kind of mess around with, an autocross or whatever. So he bought this. And so one night I went to a car meet that he was also at. I said, hey, where's the 370? I want to see a 370 because I heard that you just bought it. And he was like, oh, it's at home, but if you want to go and pick it up, you can. So I had a friend, Felix, drive me to go pick up this 370. And so I drove the 370 around the night. I drove it to the meet. Afterwards, I drove it to Taco Bell. We all got food together. I drove it to the gas station following Kyle. And every time I went to go get into it or get out of it, or just even standing near it holding the key, I felt good. I felt cool. I don't know why. It wasn't my car. It's not my car. But I felt proud of it. I felt proud getting in and out of it. And I think that really speaks volumes to the 370Z. I can't put my finger on it. I don't know what it is about it, but I just felt happy. I felt proud that, like, I was being seen getting in and out of this 370. Maybe it's the fact that it's also a Z, and growing up as a kid, I struggled with all those name games where it's like, oh, you know, pick an adjective with your name. And my name being Zach, it was always zesty, animals was zebra, and food was zucchini. That was it. I really only had 3 options for that stupid game. And so maybe it's that ZZ connection. Maybe it's the fact that it's new, but something about this car just gave me this cool feeling. I felt cool, and that's really all I can say about it. And so other cars that I would pin up against this, let's say S2000, Subaru WRX, those cars were so much fun to drive. But once I parked them, I shook the owner's hand, said thank you for letting me review it, and I went home and I went about my business. I never really thought about the cars again. But this, after I drove it back to Kyle's house and he gave me a ride home, I was stuck thinking about it. It was playing on loop, driving this car in my head. I remember that night I was literally trying to find any reason just to drive the 370 more. And so I think that is what separates good cars from great cars. Good cars, they're quick, they're fun, they make me giggle, they make me laugh, they're so much fun to drive. But great cars leave an impression in your mind after you get out of them, after you turn them off, after you park them in the garage and go inside. Those are the truly great cars, and I really do think that this is a great car. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys learned something about the 2017 Nissan 370Z. If you want to read more of my thoughts, head on over to carmarshal.com/overdrive. But again, hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.
There goes a sight from my soul.